In today's session, we are now going to work with cultural or rather traditional wounds that many of us are carrying. It is a good day here in this Heritage Month to talk about that. It is a month where we are celebrating our cultures and our traditions, actually. Even though I think we should always honor and celebrate our cultures and traditions, but I digress. It's still great that we have a day where we could dedicate to that. So, what do I mean by cultural wound? Many of us have the wound to be cultural, to honor our culture or our tradition. We live in a very westernized, modern world where our cultures and our traditions have been demonized in a lot of ways, where they've been seen as primitive or rather as demonic at the worst cases. But they've been put in such a shadow, in such a bad light, where we don't take pride in our culture and in our traditions. And also, modernization of our world really meant we moved more into the modern way of living, where we truly just, most of the people just forget about the culture and the tradition, and they take on more of the Western way of living. And there's no more connection really to our cultures and our traditions. But the wound is there where we can't actually look into our cultures or our traditions. We don't want to be associated with that because it is in such a negative connotation in different cultures, really. And so this is such a deep wound. Sometimes we're not even aware of it, but we give such a eye to someone even just doing things of tradition like slaughtering or offerings, or even uphahla or speaking to ancestors. We see that as such a taboo and such a bad thing almost. And we have that wound of seeing it like that, because we don't just see it like that. We see it like that because we were told, for the most part, that it is a taboo, it is a bad thing, and we can't really look into other form of faith, really, or of celebrating our cultures. Of course, I cannot talk about cultural wound without talking about the elephant in the room, religion. And as much as I really don't want to get into a whole bit of religion in this session, but I have to somehow address it, because religion plays a big role as to why we have this wound, why we deem our traditions and our culture in such a light, because religion has put it in that way. And for the most part, I would say unfairly put our cultures and our religion in a bad light. But I'll also say that sometimes our cultures and our religions were a bit unhumane in a way, when cultures in the past had been more drastic. We have had human sacrifice and all those other things that were really an extreme. So in a way, I get why religion wanted to counter that, to kind of bring more harmony and balance. But of course, what religion ended up doing, it ended up cutting the root, or at least attempting to cut the root, and deem it as demonic, and ask of us not to tend to our cultures or our religion, and rather to tend to tend to religion as our new culture and as our new tradition, which for the most part we have actually done that. We've taken religion as our new tradition and as our new culture, and completely turned away from the cultures and traditions of our ancestors, of our grandparents and our great-great-grandparents coming before us. So I'm not really blaming religion in the whole thing, but I am putting some blame into religion as to why we have this cultural wound. And of course, culture sometimes get kind of blurred in with traditional healing, which of course is different, but also stems from the same root almost. But lot of people that were not necessarily traditional healers have been accused of such bad things just by practicing their culture, of witchcraft, for example. If someone is practicing their culture, there have been cases where they've been deemed as witchcraft and casted out, etc. So the wound goes so deep to most of us as Africans, and here speaking in the Southern African region, through the apartheid era, and even before that, when colonization just took place, there was this turn against our own culture and against our own religion, and kind of moving forward to facing more the Western way of living and the Western way of being. And I believe that for the most part, most of our suffering really comes from us turning against our own roots and cutting them off and almost hating them, and alternatively hating our own selves, because our cultures consist of our own ancestors, the people that look like us, that were us, that we inherited their DNA, that gave us the breath of life. And when we turn against that and we call them demons and we call them demonic, or we cast them in any light, we are casting ourselves in that light, and we are seeing ourselves in that light. So it is like a double sword where we're just trying to poke the other person, but we're literally hurting ourselves in the process. So it is important to be aware. Do you have any wounds to your culture? Can you actually acknowledge your culture and your tradition and say, actually, these are my traditions, regardless what your faith is today as it stands? Because actually, culture and traditions, it's not this or that. They don't replace faith. So religion is a faith, and culture is what we came from, is what our ancestors did. And it's not necessarily has to do, like I said, with healing, with spiritual healers. It has more to do with what was done before. When someone give birth, what does that culture do? When you are, in my culture, in the Zulu culture, a girl goes through a process into womanhood up until the age where they're 21, where they then, they've been taught and they've been kind of went through the passage of womanhood. Now that's culture. That's not necessarily faith. It has nothing to do with faith or religion or any other aspects, but rather it's the culture of helping a young woman, helping a young girl turn into a woman. And like for other cultures, like the Xhosa culture, where they have the same for the boys, where they go through ukwelusa and they go through the process of manhood, which actually most cultures had those practices and they got lost in the way. And now men and women are not guided into their men or their womanhood in the modern days. And we do feel lost because we sometimes don't know how to be as women. We don't know how to be as men. And we don't even know how to be in relationships, because a big part of our culture was to literally help us grow, was to give us the tools that we need in life to navigate our life as adults, and even in adulthood, to help us still there in a lot of ways. So I've found that connecting or healing that wound that I had to actually even say in this modern well, to say, actually, this is my culture and this is how we do things, and not to feel primitive in any way, and not to feel this is backwards in any way, but take pride, me taking pride and actually dressing up in a whole gear of my culture and feeling resourced and feeling connected to, well, this is how people, my people did things, and this is how I'm also going to carry by doing things, by just involving those bits and pieces of magical cultural teachings, really, that comes with that. And I find that in the modern world, we are losing so much touch of communing with other people. We don't have communities now like before, but culture and tradition, they kind of bring that back. They bring community and they bring Ubuntu. They bring living in communion with other people. And that's what it was about. And of course, now with social media, we can have that in a way, but it is still not quite the same as it was, because it is still quite a screen. There's still a distance really in that connection. So my suggestion and my invitation to you would be to firstly to do a genogram like I will show right now, and you are kind of mapping all of these people, and you're going down to 7 generation, where you visually can see, oh, this were the people that had to be here for me to be here firstly. And then secondly, you map their culture and their tradition, because in our lineage there's so much culture and tradition that had to combine and marry into each other, or rather, have children with each other, that then made you. And we can find a way to honor all of those traditions that we have. Like for me, I have traditions of mainly of the Zulu. My mother and father, they are mainly Zulu women and Zulu men, but my grandmother from my maternal side is Xhosa, and my grandfather was Zulu, and my grandfather from my paternal side is Ndebele from Zimbabwe, Zimbabwean heritage, and so it goes back. And so I have so many cultures and traditions that actually make me up. And even though in this day I am mainly a Zulu woman, I still acknowledge the fact that I have Zimbabwean roots, and I have Xhosa roots, and so many others that I always ask, because my grandmother is still with me, so I can always ask and say, well, where did your father come from, and where did his people come from? And he can try and remember, and whatever pieces I get, I add on to, oh, this is how did they do their culture, and take interest in that and bring that with me in the little ways that I can. And slowly but for surely, I start to heal this traditional trauma and traditional wound that I'm carrying by also honoring other people's traditions and honoring other people's culture, and not really get caught up in the demonization of it all through religion and through the Western thinking. And also I don't even blame, for the most part, like I said, religion and westernization and all of that. I think we needed another form of faith, and religion brought in all the Abrahamic religions, brought in a different perspective of faith. I just don't think it's this or that. I think it's this and that. So it's culture and tradition and religion, not culture and tradition or religion. So once I started seeing it like that, I'm able to embrace both and move forward with both. and of course other spiritual aspects that I come with. But I hope you were able to follow along in this hopefully very short session where we're just tapping into our traditions and slowly looking into these wounds that we have, the wounds that our grandparents actually had to have, because our great parents and our great great parents, they're the first ones that had to turn away from their cultures and take the new way of being, which was at the time religion. So I hope you can call them by their name and say you are the daughter of this and that, from this and that clan, and where their people come from, and look and be proud of them, and take pride in the people that have given you this breath of life, the people that have given you your DNA, your body that is physical here, and don't have any shame, because it is not demonic or bad or anything, really. It was just a way they have figured out how to live with each other and how to commune. And so they came up with these gorgeous, beautiful traditions. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this session. Till we meet again. Thank you so much.
Hello. Nimtosha peke hapa. Ya, nimtosha peke hapa. Imagine, c'est une belle.